engineering team, and I am here today with Bruno. He's our product manager. Bruno, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, nice to meet you. Yeah, I think that's basically it. Another product Testkube, and yeah, can't wait to show you the new version of Testkube.
Bruno's going to be giving a live demo of Testkube 2.0, so it's going to be an exciting session for us today. Before we get started, for those of you who are new to our Testkube community, Testkube is a test orchestration and execution framework powered by Kubernetes. Solves test orchestration issues for DevOps teams, platform teams, testers, and anybody else who's running tests. Testkube allows you to define, trigger, scale, troubleshoot, and report on all phases of your test executions, allowing teams of all skill levels to intuitively build their tests and automate their test executions. We're seeing that loads of people are finding a huge amount of value in this, and cross-functional teams are starting to form across loads of our clients. So it's a very exciting time for us. As a side note, Testkube also works with existing tools, testing tooling, as well as CI/CD systems. So it replaces multiple point tools and gets rid of a lot of homegrown scripting while providing a single pane of glass for better visibility of your testing processes. It provides teams with better insights. We're going to see some of those today because we've really supercharged our Testkube insights boards and reporting. It enables data-driven decisions, optimizes your testing strategies, and basically helps improve your overall quality. And today is a really big release. We're going to be talking about test workflows, which is probably the biggest change that we've had in our tool this far. So Bruno, what would you like to add?
No, it's good. There's a lot of stuff that happened last month, especially with the new release. So yeah, I can't wait to show you.
So it's going to be an exciting stream. Before we get started, just so that everyone is aware, you are welcome to ask questions. We're live, so you can ask questions in the chat. We will answer them as we go along. You can also, if you are not sure what to ask or you have a question pop up later, please join our Slack channel. We have our entire engineering team is super active there and always excited to be answering questions. So again, we're going to be seeing a single pane of glass for all of your test results. We'll be talking about test insights, and Bruno, I think you can take it away with their demo.
Awesome, thank you. So the purpose of today is to show you the new version 2.0, which includes the new UI. So what this release has, Testkube, is the new engine, which we call test workflows. We're going to review that and also go over the new capabilities. I'm going to review the old UI and explain it to all the users. So even if you don't know anything about Testkube, it's going to be interesting for existing users. If you are watching this webinar as well, it's going to be interesting to you, so you know what changed, and so you can update if you didn't already. And if you already updated and you're already using 2.0, it's still interesting for you to see, because you're going to see features that for sure you don't know that they exist in the product. So it's going to be also very super interesting. And also documentation. So we did a big refactor of the documentation. So when I'm doing demos, I'm going to also show a bit of documentation so you can see exactly when using the product how you can leverage it to build things in Testkube. So I'll just share my screen and I'll jump right into it.
And with our documentation updates, a huge shout out to our community who's always asking questions and letting us know when there are things in our documentation that need updated. It's so helpful.
Yes, thank you. So here is the new UI. I have here a demo environment set up already. On the top, you can see my list of environments. For those of you who know how Testkube works, Testkube lives in your cluster and is able to orchestrate all of your tests for you and give you a single pane of glass. Here I have listed a few of my environments. I have the Paris environment, which is an agent that runs in a cluster and orchestrates all the tests for you there. We can have more. I have this one called New York that's offline. Also, like I can switch to it and you know, see all the things that are going there. So I'm going to use this one that is the one in Paris, and it's live. Here in this UI, what you have here on the top is the home page. When you land, you can see all of your executions, some data about your pass-fail ratio, total executions, and the failed ones. So it gives you like a trend view of your tests, also a status. The interesting and the most powerful part about this new release is the workflows engine, as I mentioned before. This new engine allows you to do the orchestration of your tests in a very simple way. Today, our users that don't use Testkube most likely orchestrate their tests either manually or from a CI/CD. What that requires that users have to go to your CI/CD, configure stuff there, and then orchestrate them. Then, when you orchestrate them, you don't have good visibility into how things went with your test, or your test passed or failed, the troubleshooting aspect of it, and this single pane of glass experience is kind of missed in your CI/CD. So that's why we have this dashboard of Testkube that gives you a lot of capabilities in a very visual and intuitive way. So let me start by adding a test. So what I'm going to do now is just add a load test in Testkube, and I'm going to execute it in this cluster, and then I'm going to show you what's the process, or does the process look like for running a test. So here we start. We can start with create using our wizard. So the first step here is I'm going to choose a kind of a testing tool that we want to use. Out of the box, Testkube comes shipped with many different options here, which is the most common testing tools that our users request. But you can add any testing tool, any language, anything that you want to run. Testkube will run it for you. Testkube only cares about an image and a tag, and then we'll run it. But out of the box, because we try to facilitate the work for our users, if we know that there's a lot of users running, for example, K6, we already have built-in capabilities like good defaults and good images that allows you to get started faster without having to configure anything. So here I'm going to create a test. So here I'm going to say my K6 test, let's say webinar 17. You can have labels to group the tests, and here is the version. In this case, I'm just going to choose the default version that is here. I'm not going to change it. Then the next step is to give the test content to Testkube. I can give like a file. I can paste a JavaScript file, which is my test. So in this case, there's a test here that tests this endpoint. Again, I can upload the file. We can also go from Git. So if you have, most likely you put all of your test files in Git repos, and you should, of course. So what you have to do here is tell Testkube what are the path, like where is the Git repo, the authentication token, if it's a private repo, branch, and path. Then Testkube is going to take those files and orchestrate them for you with the required dependencies inside your cluster, and it's going to scale them. So here is the files here. For this demo, I'm just going to use a file directly. It's just going to copy paste a test. So here there's a default test, a simple one. So I'm just going to use that. Then in the next step, you have the run command. In this run command is where you can specify flags. For example, if you want to run in verbose mode, or you want to change the number of virtual users, or perhaps other configurations. So this depends on the testing tool. Depending on the testing tool, you might add or tweak the run command. And we give you good defaults again, but if you want to change it, up to the to the user that's adding this test. Working directory, Testkube scraps the artifacts generated from those tests directly from the cluster. So when you are running a test, sometimes they produce artifacts like a JUnit report or some other thing. And or in the case of Cypress, sometimes it generates videos, right? Testkube will take those videos, store them for you in a S3 compatible storage, and then we'll show it for you directly here on this UI. But for now, we won't configure that yet. Then you click next. So everything in Testkube is a CRD, right? So it's defined as YAML, so you can know in a descripted language how everything looks like, exactly how your test is going to run. So this is a declarative way how you would like things to run. Here you can see that there's an image, comes from Grafana, it's K6 for load testing as this version, and this is the shell command that's going to run this test. So this is, basically you have the summary here. Now I'm going to create and run. So what's happening now, Testkube is just schedule a Kubernetes job in your cluster and things are running. I can click here and see the logs. You can see the logs from that comes directly from your testing tool, and you basically see all the steps here on a simple, simple UI for everything. When you want to, you can run this manually, so you can click, the run button, and you can run it again. You can integrate it with your CI/CD. So now you have this test to Testkube, and you want it to be triggered from, let's say, GitHub Actions. We give you this YAML that you can copy paste there. You just have to configure any API token so that your CI/CD can authenticate on the Testkube control plane. But it's like super straightforward. And then when your test triggers a test in Testkube, if the test fails, your pipeline will also fail. Like there's many ways to trigger the test. Like you can run things on a schedule. For example, you can tell Testkube to run a test every 5 minutes. You can configure environment variables. So for example, a URL that you want to test against. You can specify secrets. So it's very easy to configure how you want things to run. Also, let me see, I don't want to change this. You can configure how much CPU or and memory you want to give to that execution. So test workflows gives you a lot of control how you want things to run without losing the simplicity aspect of it. So now that I show you how to run a test, let's see how you can run multiple tests. So you can also combine them and you can create a flow. So for example, here we have the K6 test that we created, the webinar one, this one. Let's say I can run them in a sequence. So I can add here the K6 webinar tests in a sequence. Actually, we can even have in parallel, some of them in parallel. So I'm going to put it here. So we can create a flow that says run this test, then run these 2 tests, and then, for example, run 1 test again. These, I'm just using the same test, but these could be different types of tests. That's where this feature it's more valuable to users, is when you group, for example, API tests at the same time you group load tests or some other tests that you want to run at the same time. And because you have a cluster that can easily scale and run things in parallel, is super useful for you. So you can really reduce the testing times just by parallelizing stuff.
And we have a quick question, Bruno, from Nelson Silva. He wants to know, show it on the screen for everybody, is the CI/CD integration is GitHub Action specific, or would that same export be useful somewhere else?
It's a great question. Testkube can integrate with any CI/CD. There's a kind of underneath, it's like a CLI that runs the commands. Let me just finish this flow, and I'll just show you right away how you can do that. So let me just create and run. So first you see here all the tests I created. So it's first running 1 test, then this one is going to finish, and then it's going to run 2 tests in parallel, then it's going to run the other one. So you can have workflows that are inside the other workflows, and you can orchestrate everything. Still, this group, or you can call it a test suite, or end-to-end test suite of or like a flow that tests everything end-to-end. You can combine it here. Then when you want to integrate with your pipeline, you can show here, for example, if you use GitLab CI or Circle CI, it's very similar. So you can integrate with anyone. If you look at the details of how CI/CDs work, most of them use YAML to configure how the steps run, and the command that runs the test, it's always the same. So you see here, Testkube run test workflow with the name of the test workflow, and -f means follow. So it's very easy to integrate with Jenkins. If you have others, it's also easy to integrate. Either you just run the binary of the CLI, or like we have a Docker image as well. It is one that says CLI, so you just run it there, configure the API key ID and the environment ID, and then it connects directly, and you should be good to go. It's very easy to integrate.
And we've got one more question, which I think it's a good time to go ahead and pop it in here. We've got Nelson, who obviously has been using Testkube for some time. This is in the first version. We had test suites and tests, mainly to group tests inside of the test suite. With test workflows, can we achieve the same? I know we've got some capabilities that definitely do that. If you want to go ahead and show him.
Yeah, so I guess this is exactly what we see here. So you can group many tests inside a group. You can group tests and run them how you would like them to run. So this is that is actually capability. So if you want to answer the question, so yeah, so you can group tests how you like them, and Testkube can take care of it. So before, so maybe let me just add a few more notes. So before we had tests in the previous version, tests and test suites. Your only way of running a group of tests would be to put them in test suite. Now you don't have a different concept. You just create a test workflow and then create another test workflow that runs a group of test workflows. So you just run them here. You can specify run this workflow, then run these two, and then run another one. So this how you group them, but there's ways to run things in parallel that is even more powerful. Here you can look at our product, and we give you examples on how you can configure stuff. So you can see different use cases and how you can expand your capabilities when it comes for testing. Our most recent one was parallel executions. So what the request that we got was, well, we like to run things in parallel, but we want Testkube to dynamically read my tests and parallelize them across different workers. So that's a more powerful way of parallelizing, instead of you manually defining different tests and then putting them to run in parallel. Testkube can do all of that for you dynamically. So here in this case, I'm just gonna run this example. So I'm just gonna put again webinar 17. Then I'm gonna create and run. So what I'm doing here, actually, let me just show you the definition. We have a workflow defined that takes as an input duration, virtual users, number of workers. Then it takes files, those JavaScript files from a Git repo, and dynamically spreads let's say the execution across different workers. That's what this does. And we have here kind of a template or like an example that you can use to achieve that goal. So whenever you click run, here I'm just going to click again. You can specify, for example, a certain duration, number of virtual users can be 20, and then you can say that you want 3 workers. So whenever you press run, Testkube will basically work to achieve that goal that you just specified. These parameters that I showed here are fully configurable. So in your organization, if you want a different field to be set every time somebody clicks run, you can define that. That configuration, it's done here. It just says config, see duration, virtual users and workers. If I add another one here, they would appear there, and then you can have access to this variable here, basically. See, config.workers. So that's gives you a lot of power in how you trigger and configure your test execution. So in this case, my test run, and then here the shell command here. Duration is missing, so I just have to put the number of, it's 10, but 10 seconds. 10 virtual users and workers. So I'm just going to do it again. So it's going to pass the parameters to all the workers, and then things should work at the same time. So now it's synchronizing the load. And there's a very awesome capability here, which is Testkube can synchronize when to start the execution of these load tests, because you want to run them in parallel, but also you want to synchronize when they start, right? So because you want to generate peak load performance, let's say. So Testkube can do that. So here you see the logs from all of your workers. You can just go through all the logs. Also, we get the artifacts. So these workers produced artifacts, and you can see the artifacts from each one of the workers. And then you can click on one, and then you can directly see the artifact that was generated here. So you can see some data. In this case, this artifact, this report generated by Key6 shows no data because we just produced a simple example. But when you configure, complex scenarios, you're going to see like charts here. You can see even more data. So this is, some data about the load test that we performed, which was a simple one, just testing an endpoint. But you can see like a lot of data, and this is super powerful. It's something that you cannot easily do on CI/CDs, which is to easily add tests and quickly spread them across workers and then see the results in a simple place and then adapt to different other like suite of tests. You can do that in CI/CDs, but it involves a lot of complexity and time and resources just to achieve, with a simple test. With Testkube, you get that flexibility for all types of tests. So this is like for parallelization. That's another use case that you can do now. You can do also test we call matrix input. So you can give a different like a list of inputs to Testkube and say to Testkube, run this test with all of these different inputs. The use case that we have here is, let's say you have a front-end test that you want to test with different browsers. So maybe you want to test with Chrome, Edge, and Firefox, and then you want to run the like a test just to understand if your UI behaves the same way in different browsers, right? So here I'm just gonna create a test called Webinar 17, and then I'm gonna create and run. So again, what's happening now is that it's initializing, starting the services. It's going to start for each one of the browsers, right? Chrome, Edge, and Firefox is running these tests in parallel and see if things pass or fail, and then give you the results. So it's very easy to parallelize this type of tests. This is so there are some tests that you cannot parallelize, and you have to run them in a sequence. For example, if you have a test that creates a user and then uses that user to do some operations, and then after you do the operations, you have a read operation that you want also to test. So depending on what you do, you cannot parallelize. But there are other things you can, especially when you want to test the same test and use it to test across different browsers. That's something that you should parallelize. So another feature that we also launched with this new release is instantiation of services. So in many cases, you want to instantiate the service that is about to be tested, or a service that's going to assist you in your test. So, for example, let's say you want to test if some database operations are successful, and you want to test an API as well, or a database for that API. You can do so here. So let me just create this test so you can visualize it. So you can instantiate services that you are going to test as well. So let me create it again. So for example, here you can say that initialize, we're going to start a database service, going to check that it's run, and then, for example, you could run a test right after you initiate those services. So this is not like a CI/CD, so we don't want to, Testkube is not intended to deploy applications, it's intended to test them. So we encourage our users to deploy these services a way to test them, but not to deploy them to production. So don't see these services functionality as a way of deploying applications to your cluster. It's more, if you can, it's more focused on the testing aspect of it. So also I forgot to show, as you run, Testkube will show you the trends, like it shows you nice graphs with the duration, and it like shows you a lot of data that are useful for you to optimize your tests. So you get that per workflow, or you can get that across the whole environment. So here we have something that we call test insights that gives you, the insights for the last week or for the last month. Gives you, for example, how many tests run, how many test workflows run, and then how many of them passed, how many of them failed, and if any were aborted. Also tells you the duration as well, so you can know how much execution time you have on your clusters. Other interesting features are that you can see them like, how do you call this? A plot. I think that's the term, a plot. You can see the test executions, and then you can see them in a quadrant. See the duration on the x-axis and the number of executions on the y-axis, and then you can understand if you are being efficient or not. So the test that runs the most times and takes the longest is probably like where you want to focus your efforts on making it more efficient, right? Because it's most of the time is spent there of your execution time. Like you can get a lot of nice insights from here. You can get these reports that you can see the trend of let's see, by status. So for example, here you can see that for each day on this on let's say 10th of July, you had the test that passed took 41 minutes, the test that failed took 7, but also you can get the percentages that passed and the percentage that failed. So on that same day, 9 failed, 83 passed. So you get that percentages, and also the trend. Something that is very useful for you is that you can understand by day or even the last week what's the trend look like. You would want the red bar to decrease and the green bar to increase, right, with time. If everything is failing and the green bar is very small, probably you should do something about it, right? So that's the the kind of insights that you should take from these type of reports. And also duration. So you can see which tests take the longest here. Also are executed the most. In this case, in this chart, we know that on the 16th of July, Postman test was the one that ran the most times. And also duration. Where's duration? Here. So you can know in that day that the one that takes the longest is the test suite for Cypress, which took almost 20% of the total execution time. So this is a very interesting feature for the insights. Then let me show the integrations. On the integration side, Testkube focuses on giving you the capabilities to integrate with both your cluster, with the external tools like Slack and PagerDuty. Like you can integrate Testkube pretty much with anything. So the first integration I'm going to talk about is Kubernetes events. I showed you before that you can trigger your tests manually. You can trigger your tests from a CI/CD. You can use a CLI as well to trigger your tests. You can trigger your tests on a schedule. Another way you can trigger them is by telling Testkube to listen for an application to be modified and then deployed to a cluster. Testkube will read that event and then it's going to trigger the test for you. So let me show you how that's defined here. So I can have my my trigger webinar 17, and then you can select that there is a deployment. You can say that when a deployment with a certain label was, let's say, modified, you can tell Testkube to run a test workflow, and the workflow is, as a certain name, can be this one, right? So you can tell the Testkube, to run this test every time that happens. Something went wrong on my dev environment. I don't know what. Maybe it's the label. No, the name. Let me put the core test workflows. I don't know what's happening on the test environment, but basically it is how you can trigger tests from directly from your cluster. Then there's webhooks. So the webhooks allow you to send payloads or messages to external tools when certain events happen. Those events can be test failed, test passed, so it can be anything. So for example, if you have here, I'm going to just show the event. So when the workflow starts, you can send an event. When it ends, based on if it passed or if it failed, you can send those events. The two most common cases that we see are the first one is with Slack. So our users integrate this with Slack. So every time a test fails, they get a notification on their Slack channel. They click on a link and they go back to Testkube and they see what's happening. The other one is PagerDuty. This one is more for SRE purposes. So some companies use Testkube to monitor if the services are running well or not in certain environments. So they have the test schedule to run every X minutes, right? And then when they failed, it sends a message to their instance, and then they say, well, okay, this service is like there's something wrong with this service. We have to check it out. So those are two of the most common scenarios that we see people doing. I think that's it. Oh, we also have status page. So let me show you what you can do as well with status page. Let me show you the documentation. So now that you have a lot of tests on your cluster and you can run them on a schedule, you can tell Testkube to kind of monitor services, and then you can create a page which you call status page to show you the history of if they were operational or not. In this page here, we created one to test our website, documentation, and our blog. And then we have a test called Testkube Docs 5 minutes. So it's a test that runs every 5 minutes, and then it's always making sure that documentation is available. So let's say on the 17th of July at between 5 and 6, there was a minor disruption to the docs, which made these look like orange. Could be in this hour, could be for a second, or can be for a minute. You just know that in that hour there was some disruption in the service. So usually we try to have 99 dot something percent for these services. That's what most people try to achieve, and you can get that data here very out of the box with Testkube. I think that's like most. I think I give a big, description and went through everything. Not sure if there are more questions, Courtney, that I can go over. Yeah.
Yeah, we do have one more question. I think you did hit everything. I was going to tell you status pages, but you got it at the last minute. But I mean, there's so much going on, so much value packed into this 2.0 release as well. We do have one more question. So a Windows Refund, who is one of our fantastic community members, wanted to see a little bit more about workflows and if it supports retries of tests. So how do you rerun the test, and give a little bit of the scope of per step for what that workflow would look like.
Yeah, so retries, we have that. Let me try to see if I can find an example in our docs. Retry. Yeah, so we have conditions with workflow. That's a great question. Thank you, Windows Refund. So before I go into that, we have an expression language that gives you a lot of capabilities in how you configure your, the execution of your tests. So you can have many conditions when to run things, when to retry, and you can read all about it here. So here you can say that a test retries until you want to retry until it passes, or like there's certain conditions that you want to check and have to have about your retries, and we fulfill that purpose. So in this case, we have a retry count of 3. So, and the condition is always runs 3 times. But a condition can also be different. It can be until it passes, or can be other things that you might want to configure there, and that's fully configurable. So you can go there and just try that.
Great. Don't think we have any other questions right now. We'll give people a few minutes. If you do have questions, you can ask them live in our chat. Give you a couple of minutes. In the meantime, Bruno, why don't you talk to us a little bit about what's coming up for Testkube? This is obviously a very big release, but our team does not stop. So tell us a little bit about what's coming up in the next month or so.
Yeah, so we are focusing on two lanes. One lane is further optimizing the use of test workflows. The other lane is focusing on the needs of our enterprise customers. So the first one is we are going to introduce more improvements on the test workflows experience, mostly regarding parallelization and also the templating mechanism. So as I showed you, like there's templates that can be used by your test workflows, and so we're going to improve that experience and also on parallelization. So that's the what's coming up in the next weeks actually. The other one is that we're getting a lot of traction with especially like big enterprises that have hundreds of users, and one of the requests was to have fine-grained RBAC controls. Today you can control who has access to each environment and if they can read or they can write. Actually, I forgot to demo that now that I remember about that. But so we have that, let's say, basic RBAC for environment, and our customers were asking us to have that per workflow or subset of workflows, and also because they have many teams in the same environment, so they would like to see different tests for each team. So in the next months, what we are focusing on are on those more complex problems for those companies that we want to solve.
Great. Lots going on. We do have one more question coming in. And this is a fantastic question because as you and I both know, Bruno, we've got loads of people who have been using Testkube for quite some time, and they have been using test suites. And so they do still have access to test suites with our 2.0 release. But we've got a longtime user here asking, do we have a general idea of when test suites will actually be end of life? Do you want to comment on that a little bit? We're definitely giving people some runtime there to get used to using workflows, but do you want to comment a bit?
Yes, of course. That's another great question. So we want to make sure that all of our users are successful with test workflows, right? So they stayed for a few months in a beta stage. So some of you already experienced them months ago, for sure. So we give them enough time that we tested them and we make sure they were mature before we release this version, right? Now with this version, we want to really make sure that everybody is able to transition. We give some some period. Our estimate is that in the Q4, like at the end of this year, we would give a end of life to test suites and tests. Until then, there's no we won't add any new features to tests or test suites. We might fix some bugs for our customers, but that's it. But they will stay there. We won't remove them from the product. They will stay there. You can use them, and mostly like until the end of the year, we'll let it stay there.
Fantastic. Hopefully that's a good answer for our users. I think we're about done. We don't have a lot more questions. For anybody who's tuning in after we've stopped being live, you can still ask us questions. You can jump in our Slack channel. We have our entire engineering team that is super active there. We're always answering people's questions and excited to welcome more people into our community. So please don't hesitate to jump in and ask questions if you're watching this after the fact. You can also, if you're looking to get started or get more information about Testkube, jump on testkube.io. We've got loads of information about the tool. We also have a fantastic amount of Learn pages that just has loads of information, not just about Testkube and our integrations, but about testing and CI/CD space in general. So definitely check out those resources that we have to share with you there. And in the meantime, Bruno, this has been a fantastic release. Congratulations to you and the entire Testkube team. And we're looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.